My name is Justin Beals, and I'm the CEO at Roundbox Global. Just really quickly, I think one of the major outcomes that we had from our conversation on evaluation was that it would be nice to have a standard for the publication of raw data from the evaluations and the data gathering that's going on. That would give the opportunity for more of the evaluation tools to get the mashups. But I think just two other points that were pretty important in doing evaluation in general is to do your research up front. Know your indicators, your outputs, and your outcomes, plenty to read on that, but be prepared to do evaluation before it happens. And then using standard scientific testing methods to create a little more rigor, again, a part of that evaluation up front. But I think it was a great group, and I certainly learned a lot. So.
Thanks, Eric.
Well, the only thing I'd add from that is that one of the big takeaways is the methodology is more important than the technology, which is hard to say as a technologist. All right, so can we get somebody from the group that was sitting right here, whoever is going to speak?
Hi. Our group was about using communities to do simple surveys. And one of the challenges we came up with when we were all talking about our backgrounds and why we're interested in this was the challenge of incentivizing people to respond to the surveys. And we came up with some ideas about that, maybe offering them something free along with their response. For example, you can have a free phone call to your family if you report how you're using your bed net. And then other things about taking advantage of where people already are going every day to convene, such as a community fountain, a community hub, and collecting information there instead of having them to do it on their phone. But I thought what was really interesting is then people kind of took a step back and said, why do we need this survey information in the first place? And can we maybe get the information in other ways besides the simple surveys? And one of the ideas was using high tech along with low tech. For example, embedding some of the products with RFID tags so that you could track it easily and not have to rely on people's responses. The other idea, which was interesting, was to perhaps do some of these research and surveys before you even distribute a product so that you can design a better product and then eliminate the need for some of this survey information. So I think that was really interesting.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. So we had a small group over here, which we have a rapporteur. We have visual aids.
So can everybody hear me?
Now we'll need.
Too bad. I don't really yell very well. So we are the group that talk about how to get buy-ins from large organizations. So we identify different challenges and how we can potentially make a next step. So I think the first one we were talking about is how to remove resistance from those organizations, and then how do we get buy-in. So one thing first we talk about is when we talk about larger organizations, what are we talking about? Are we talking about NGOs? Are we talking about private sectors? Or are we talking about institutes or maybe colleges? So they might have different needs and then goals. For example, that for a private sector, they might care about how to identify their customer 10 and 15 years from now. For an NGO, they might want to measure and how do you capture the impacts and how do you get data back. So we talk about different approaches. So we kind of narrowed that down to two different approaches. One is from the top down to get a buy-in from executives. And also another way to look at that is how can we get people from the ground level to kind of experiment and then do a couple of pilot runs, and then they present the data, so we kind of pull the data and then prove to the executive team that see how well this is working. And then we have different approaches. For example, that we might boil down a 2-hour data to a 2-minute video and then present that. So I think video is a very, very powerful form to make an impact and then engage people. And I think that's pretty much it. Did I miss anything? That's it. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks. And Nigel, are you the rapporteur for your group?
I think I am. If
if I could have a pen just for a second, I might try and sketch some things out. Excellent. We were the group that was discussing this issue about how do you pull together, say, crowdsourced data or open data in a way and organizational institutional data. And that's a very large collection of problems and different people want it for different reasons, so forgive me. What I'll try and map out are some of the challenges that I think we identified and some of the key points. And I think none of this is new to people who have been working in this for a while, so forgive us for having to put it down that way. But I think we did identify a few things that are important and then require follow-up. So overall, basically, I wanted to say that we had our organizations and the crowd. And in some ways, that's just individuals watching, or it could be individuals on the ground, could be beneficiaries, if you want to use that language, et cetera, et cetera. And we're talking about the fact that we're struggling already with this problem about getting organizational information and comparing and putting it together. So if you like, this might be Relief Web or some other system for doing that. It could be purely internal, it could be external or whatever. And the crowd, if we're doing that, we might imagine that could be Ushahidi. And so one of the challenges now is that we've got a lot of information in two different places and we want to use it to reinforce each other, to do new kinds of sense making from this. And so what that requires fundamentally is sort of our missing layer at the moment is the bit that allows us to transform and unite the data. So there's an element here of, I called it transformation, right? But basically that requires some kind of technology piece. And I know there are examples out there of approaches to this, but call it meta tagging, call it search or automatic indexing or metadata generation or lots of things like that. Either machine learning types, automated systems, or people doing it. Somehow we've got to get it together so we can actually put the stuff together and do the next step, if you like, which is the visualization or the mashup. And basically, I'm calling that sense making in a way. That's just the way I try and think about this. But critically, we've not just got, the organizations view themselves as doing this to enable better decision making or decision support or something like that, or better reporting. And so critically is actually the motivations for doing this. And we sort of talked about a couple of different motivations. And really for organizations, it's about validation, for which I'd include monitoring and evaluation as a part of that. And the other one is basically better decisions, decision support, right? We've got more information, so hence we can tell if these people need new stuff, etc. And the example that triggered me off, different people talked about different examples in the group. The one that really triggered me off in terms of thinking about this completely differently was being in Sudan in 2004, 2005, and having the SRSG of the UN receive text messages from Darfur about people saying, I haven't got my bed net. Right? And that's a complete game changer in terms of, you have to at least think about, am I going to completely ignore that, or am I going to make use of it in some way to do something different? Right? And that's this organizational piece of the pathway. Right? But, so that's decisions. So we need the tools down here that enable us to do that. Right? That's fine, because that's organizations using the crowd to add to their data. But there's the other piece, which is the crowd making use of that same information, which is really basically to do some fundamental tasks that are ultimately threatening to organizations in a way, right? Which is to monitor. Forgive my writing going sideways, I'm just struggling here. And to ask, so to make asks about what they need or what requirements are there. And I think a highly underrated piece, and it's what Ushahidi does a lot of, which is simply to tell, right? To have voices heard and to speak out. Which is something that we don't really recognize very much as being a valid function of these information systems from my point of view. It's more akin to the journalism function. So basically, I think there's a whole pile of stuff in here that's not even analyzed about how we do that well. But part of the perquisites for here are basically, there are a lot of issues around trust and openness, which relate to accurately communicating and identifying the sources of the data, We need formats for enabling that to be done if you're going to do a mashup, to communicate all that information about the data. And then I'll put another piece in here from the organizational point of view, having suffered through it, trying to get this to happen a lot in the field, is basically that risk profile to organizations about why should they share? Why should they be more open? Ultimately, it's a question about, well, I want to tell my donors what I want to tell them. I don't want you to tell the donors what I've been doing. I need to tell them myself. So there's lots of different threats in there that need come into the organizational change and adoption piece that I don't think we've at all unpacked. But I think until we get some of these things built, we can't even start to talk about it because no one will be challenged to address those threats and risks.
Thank you.